Good afternoon and welcome to the NFHS Media Availability Session. We're glad that you could join us today. We are pleased to have you with us with the National Federation of State High School Associations and the national leader and advocate for high school sports and activities in the United States. We have Dr. Karissa Niehoff, our NFHS Executive Director, on our session today. We are pleased to welcome from the Aspen Institute, John Solomon, the Editorial Director for the Institute's Sport and Society Program. Just wanted a few housekeeping things to begin with. This session can be recorded. You're certainly welcome to do that, but a recording of the session will also be available following the event on our NFHS YouTube channel, and any audio and video files are also available upon request. Again, the live streaming is permitted, and please do place any questions that you have in our Q&A as John and Karissa are talking about our topics today, and we will get to those questions as soon as they are completed with their opening statements on these subjects. Today we're here to address the Reimagining School Sports Initiative of the Aspen Institute, and John will be talking about that and the Project Play initiative. And then Karissa will be looking at kind of the Fall Sports Championship update with football and wrestling, where we're at across the country with completion of state championships. And then our first outlook, particularly with basketball and wrestling and winter sports. And then we also wanted to provide a little bit of information today about some new courses and a new parent credential that we have for parent courses on our NFHS Learning Center, our educational initiative. Again, my name is Bruce Howard. I'm the Director of Publications and Communications, and helping me here today on our team is Chris Boone, our Assistant Director, and he'll be directing your questions to our panelists today. Cody Porter, our Manager of Media Relations, and Nate Perry, our Coordinator of Media Relations, are here as well to assist in getting your questions answered and run our session today, and appreciate their efforts. So at this time, I want to turn it over to Karissa Niehoff, our Executive Director of NFHS, who then will also introduce John Solomon to you today. Karissa?
Well, thank you, Bruce, and welcome to everyone on the call. It's always appropriate to say at first that we hope you are well, that your families are well, and that you can continue to be well as we get through this tough pandemic in month 8 at this point. We also want to highlight the good work that you do. We're very appreciative of all of our media family, no matter what genre, and we are happy to communicate with you in any form or fashion when we are available, and we prioritize that for you all. So outside of these availability sessions, if you would like to contact us at any time, we'll have some contact information at the end of the program so that you can reach out to any of us here at the NFHS. So it's good to be with you again. Before I introduce John, I just would like to say that, as you all know, the NFHS has existed for over 100 years with the purpose of serving as a national leader, an educator, an advocate, a supporter of, and a protector of all that is unique about education-based athletics and other activities. And we are not alone out there in terms of folks that work in this ecosystem. For a long time, we've been great supporters of the Aspen Institute. We have had great respect for the research that they have done and the information that they have shared on a number of fronts, but most especially in the world of youth sports. And most recently, moving their research efforts into the middle level, and now ultimately looking at some efforts at the high school level. The Reimagining School Sports Initiative is something we're excited about and want to be good partners with the Aspen Institute as this work plays out, because we're all concerned about high school student athletes' opportunities to engage, to enjoy, and to persevere in a sport opportunity of their choice. So we were really thrilled when we learned of this initiative. You may have seen our release a while back, but we're very excited that John Solomon could be here today to introduce that initiative to all of you and certainly entertain any questions that you may have before we get into some of the sport updates from the NFHS. So over the last 8 months, I've gotten to know John pretty well because we have found ourselves on a number of panels, task forces, public events, media events, as we all work to communicate about keeping opportunities for youth going. And John is a tremendous professional, very knowledgeable, obviously child-centered and youth sports-centered, and that's why the Aspen Institute and Project Play is so successful. He's behind the scenes. So John, thank you very much for being here. And I pass the microphone to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Karissa, and thank you for having me. And the NFHS has been a great partner for us, in our recent work of reimagining school sports in America. So it's really valuable to have your thought leadership, being part of this initiative. So I wanted to spend just a little bit of time explaining the work that I do, that we do at the Aspen Institute, and then get into our project and also some interesting findings that we've had recently during COVID-19. A little bit of background, I'm a former college sports reporter, most recently at cbssports.com. And admittedly, I didn't pay much attention to youth and high school sports when I was a reporter, except when I coached my son's way too competitive t-ball team and when I was reporting on like high school football recruits. I will tell you what I know now, and that is that there are so many fascinating stories about people and issues in youth sports for the media to cover. The topics are so plentiful, whether it's community, race, access, policy, money, parent and coach behavior and teachings, early sports specialization. It's really an untapped market for more media to explore. And all of that is just to say that if any of you are ever interested in writing more about youth sports issues, please feel free to reach out to me. So 3 years ago, I began working as the editorial director of the Aspen Institute Sports and Society program. And our main initiative is called Project Play, which develops, applies, and shares knowledge to help stakeholders build healthy communities through sports. And the idea is that every child should have the opportunity for quality access to sports, regardless of race, gender, income, or ability. And as Karissa mentioned, we started Project Play, it was in 2013, largely focusing on ages 6 to 12, but we've now launched phase 2 of our work, which focuses on reimagining high school sports. And we think that high school sports sits at a crossroads. We know from research the cognitive, academic, physical, and mental health benefits of playing sports and having regular exercise. But we also know due to budgets and other pressures, only 37%, I should say 39% of students participate. As you can see in this slide with data from 2017, the rates were the lowest at that time when it came to urban schools at 32%, high poverty schools at 27%, and charter schools at 19%. This limited supply of sports experiences impacts the lives of students and even the culture of sports at younger ages. When there are fewer opportunities to play in high school, it's driven the rise of early forming, expensive club and travel teams, which are seen as the pathway to playing time at the high school level. Next slide, please. So before the pandemic, just a little bit of some data here. There was some good news that total sports participation was increasing for youth between ages 13 to 17. But we know that as youth get older, the opportunities and interest to be physically active and play sports often disappear. So in 2019, as you can see here, youth sports lost almost 3 million kids during the transition from elementary to middle school ages. And this slide, which has data from the Sports and Fitness Industry Association, shows which sports lost and gained the most participants in that transition. So baseball lost almost 2 million, soccer lost about 741,000, track and field was one that gained about 835,000. The losses it's a lot to lose. And it's typically due to kids being priced out or losing interest at young ages. Next slide, please. So the need to identify strategies and models that engage more students, we think has only grown this year, right? Schools are responding to incredible challenges from the COVID-19 pandemic. There are calls for greater racial equity in society's leading institutions, including sports. And one challenge is going to be getting some parents and students comfortable to return to sports when restrictions are lifted, as you see on this slide. So Project Play recently partnered with Utah State University to survey youth sports parents several times during the pandemic to understand their attitudes. And from June to September, parents became more comfortable with their children returning in all forms of sports. The comfort level for interscholastic sports was 57% in September, and that was up from 51% in June. Black parents do have greater concerns than white parents, which is not surprising since we know COVID-19 is disproportionately affecting people of color at higher rates. Another really interesting finding in the survey was that 29% of youth sports parents said their child has lost interest in sports during the pandemic. And that's up from 19% when we surveyed in June. So that's really a number that we're going to keep watching, because having 3 out of 10 youth sports parents say their kids aren't interested is certainly concerning. Next slide. So we also know that the financial challenges for high schools to program sports are immense. They're going to continue to be immense and only accelerate during the crisis and the recovery. And we believe at Project Play that superintendents, principals, athletic directors, physical education teachers, and coaches will need to innovate like never before as they reintroduce these programs. And we think there needs to be a heightened priority given to access, emotional health, and human development. So given schools' responsibility to serve all students, we're asking how can they create more opportunities through intramurals or clubs or PE or community partnerships, unified programs, or other ideas. So to help, Project Play recently launched a major new phase of our work, as Karissa mentioned, called Reimagining School Sports in America. It's in partnership with Adidas Reebok, Dick's Sporting Goods Foundation, and Hospital for Special Surgery. And Karissa is graciously on our steering committee as we think through these topics, and the NFHS is helping to promote the initiative. We're conducting a national search for exemplary high schools that make healthy opportunities in sports and physical activity available to students. So 8 high schools will each receive a $20,000 award. So if you want to write about this search, or if you know about local high schools you think should apply, feel free to learn more information, understand the application process, which is available as you see on the screen there at as.pn/schoolsports. And then throughout 2021, the Aspen Institute will host a series of roundtables that will help generate ideas about how to access sports for all high school students. Eventually, the winning schools and features of their model will be profiled in a summary report authored by Project Play that also highlights exemplary features and innovations of other finalist schools. And then finally, in 2022, we'll produce a final report that recommends systems level changes in high school sports and aggregates the best strategies from our national search. So really pleased to be here, and I will look forward to your questions and turn it back over to Karissa. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, John. I thought you did a terrific job capturing that because there's been so much work going into this effort. So we look forward to working with you and going out there and discovering the best practices and the innovative thinkers out there around school sports. So Cody, if we can jump back into our presentation. We will next be looking at our championship updates from the fall sports, in particular football and volleyball, which in the initial guidance document that the NFHS released on May 15th, you may recall had defined sports in 3 tiers of perceived risk when it came to COVID-19 contagion. There was a lot of energy around football, whether or not to play, what this might look like for high schools, if it even was interscholastic, as well as volleyball, because volleyball, as we know, is an indoor sport. So most of our state associations have neared the end of their fall seasons. And you can see here, as of today, 30 of our states have decided to proceed with their fall football postseason plans that actually conclude with state championships. 5 states have adopted postseason plans that do not end with a state champion, and they may end at the regional level. And you could see the states there. Those 5 are Alaska, Maryland, Minnesota, New Jersey, and Wisconsin. And you'll see again, the states' decisions there may vary, but obviously it's looking at not bringing a number of teams down the tournament direction to a champion. This is a national map of the postseason guide for the fall football season. This may look very familiar to you. The season delays, which are red, these are states that have moved football in its entirety to a later date, most often spring, following January 1, or sometimes even later into March. So you'll see those states there in red. You'll see the states in blue that have postseason without the state championship. And then you'll see the gray, which is the great majority of our states. And again, these are state championships. These are the 30 states we referenced. So next slide, Cody. Okay, in terms of volleyball, we also had 30 states that proceeded with the fall volleyball postseason plans, ending with state championships. 5 states, and some of these states were different from football. You'll see those below. 5 states have adopted postseason plans that do not have a state final championship. These states are Alaska, Connecticut, Maryland, Massachusetts, and Minnesota. Again, the postseason plans may vary, but again, primarily include the pods of teams competing in a regional or sectional kind of a situation and ending the season there. There were 16 states that decided to delay volleyball. We have a map for you here, similar to football. You'll see that the states in red, those 16 have delayed the season to, again, either late, early winter or early spring, sometimes even moving into what we might say is mid-spring. But we definitely are playing most often after January 1 here. The states in blue have postseason with modified finals. And then the gray are those states that have moved forward with state championships as planned. Next slide. So that's the fall, at least as of now. I can tell you that we are looking at accumulating the boys and girls soccer data across country. We're in the final stages of gathering those bits of information for you. I will tell you too, Cody is assembling a folder for everyone on the call that will have the fall season reflections as well as some other documents for you, including basketball and wrestling considerations for rules modifications that we released earlier, and the completion charts themselves, which get much more granular into the states, the dates, the processes in terms of sport completion. So all of those materials will be available for you in an informational folder. So as we look to the winter basketball season, we're getting a lot of questions as we start preseason practices and have the conversations with our state associations who have chosen to delay, primarily around basketball, but also wrestling. Right now, as of today, we are seeing that 24 states are planning to proceed without any changes to the regular season basketball schedules. 17 states have already adopted modifications that alter the regular season schedule by either delaying the start of the season or condensing the season in its entirety, reducing the number of contests. For example, when many schools may be playing games on their schedule, either out of state or out of league, one strategy is playing only in league contests, and thereby reducing the number of contests overall. So we're seeing a lot of creative thinking there around how to delay the start, how to implement a season that has COVID contagion in mind. So again, that the completion charts and information that we have in greater detail, we will make available to you. The remaining 10 states for the sport of basketball, they still have yet to determine or release guidelines to the public for the 2020-2021 winter sports seasons. A lot of factors are coming into their decision-making process, from the top down with governors, expectations, to state health agencies, local school districts, and boards of education. Certainly they have to weigh in COVID numbers and metrics. They also have to weigh in demographics. and challenges to securing the appropriate resources to implement sport programs. So even facilities considerations in environments where the climate may be more friendly year round, where you can perhaps start a basketball season by practicing outdoors, that may not be an option in all of our states that are experiencing cold weather right now. So we have to also consider the facilities, the gymnasiums, ventilation, social distancing options, whether or not locker rooms are even being used, and the number of teams that are expecting to have access to a practice facility when we do want to be sure that there's some sort of exiting of the gym to allow for air exchange to take place. So the decision making is very complex. I can tell you our states are not taking it lightly and are working diligently with those most important to collaborate with as they make their decisions. So here's the 2021 basketball season modification map. You'll see we have in light gray those states to still be determined, and that amounts to 10. You'll see no changes in the darker gray, and then you'll see in the blue the modifications. But again, to date, no state association has canceled anything that has been delayed, whether we typically call it a fall or winter sport. No state association at this point has canceled anything for the entirety of the 2021 school year. When we look at wrestling, right now we have 14 states that are proceeding without modification of schedules. We have 27 states that have opted to modify their seasons compared to how they traditionally do implement the sport of wrestling. And then there are 9 states still that have yet to determine what their decision will be and release guidelines and schedules for the wrestling season. What we're starting to see with some of our states, and here's the map, that again, the modified seasons are in blue, no changes are in the darker gray, and then the lighter gray are those states that still have to arrive at a decision and a complex plan. We're seeing in the sport of wrestling, again, some very creative thinking, because of course the sport of wrestling is a high, it's in the higher tier in terms of risk for COVID transmission. You have 2 kids that are very close together for minutes at a time on a particular surface. There's full contact, and certainly the potential to transmit any kind of virus through transmission of respiratory droplets or aerosol. So our states are looking at ways to keep teams together in pods, to fully sanitize mats between matches, to encourage multiple singlets to be used, and after each match to change into a fresh singlet, to do weigh-ins that are not the entire group, but again in pods as appropriate, and even separating out weight class competitions. So looking at air exchange in gymnasiums, social distancing, of course, coaches in masks for all sports, and possibly no fans in the stands when it comes to spectators. Next slide, please, Cody. The final updates we wanted to share with you today have to do with some new developments in the NFHS Learning Center. We have established what we're calling now a National Parent Credential. As you know, we offer many courses on our Learning Center platform that are free of charge for parents to explore. Their educational videos, their full-bodied educational courses, and there are also a number of paid courses, not just for parents, but for any number of stakeholders in the world of high school sports and activities. Our folks in our Learning Center staff have put together now an actual parent credential. If parents take the full course, the parent seat, and the new course, Positive Parenting Within School Programs, which has been revised, if they complete both of those full courses, they will have achieved the National Parent Credential and will receive a certificate and a badge to be displayed on their Learning Center dashboard, which is something that is created for anyone that registers with the Learning Center and enjoys any of our coursework. We feel like this is a really important effort to continue our emphasis on connections with parents and providing schools with educational resources and messaging and strategies that can be used with parents to really encourage supportive behavior in the stands and on the sidelines, as well as supportive parenting with their own children, whether it's sport, performing arts. What are some of the strategies that are good for parents to embrace that really are holistic in nature, that are really considerate of the whole child, the growth and development process, and the unique opportunity that is education-based high school sports and activities. So we think that the parent certificate is another incentive for parents to take on their own learning and responsibility for demonstrating good parenting and good behavior. And of course, allowing the NFHS to recognize them as folks that care and took the extra step to go through an educational process. We still do have 3 parent videos that have been bundled together now. We have the Parent Seat original video, not the course. We have Beyond the Scoreboard, and now the newest in the trio, a video called A Lasting Relationship. And we are bundling those now to get out to schools for free. And we've found that they've got a lot of traction in preseason meetings that ADs have sponsored for the parent community. So we're really excited about that and all of the other resources that we have available on our NFHS Learning Center platform. So that concludes the formal presentation that both John and I have for you today. We did want it to be fairly brief. We know it's a high-level overview of some very important things happening out there and in the areas, of course, that you probably have questions about. So at this point, we would love to entertain questions that you may have as best as we can.
Absolutely. Thank you, Karissa and John. And as a reminder, if you put your questions into Q&A, we'll direct them to our speakers this afternoon. I have a couple questions in there already. The first one is for Karissa and John, if you'd like to both answer. But what is your advice to coaches, families, and student athletes in California, where the State Department of Public Health has since August limited school-based and youth sports to conditioning with no games and hasn't provided an update yet, with CIF competition scheduled to begin December 12th.
John, would you like to start with the youth sports, and then I'll take on high school?
Yeah, sure. So at first, I imagine it's going to be incredibly frustrating. And I understand that frustration. Actually, I'm usually a youth soccer coach this time of year with my son, and we're not playing. It's been shut down. And it's frustrating because we're missing out on the value of physical and social and emotional benefits. So I totally get it. At the same time, though, I think we want to just be really clear and make sure that we're balancing those needs for kids to play sports with public health interests as well, and making sure that these are valid decisions that are being made and listening to the scientists and the public health experts in terms of when it's safe to return. We have seen across the country some outbreaks and cases linked to various levels of sports, whether it's youth sports, whether it's high school sports, whether it's college. Just last week, the Shelby County, Tennessee Health Department shared that out of the first 500 positive COVID cases that they've studied of students and school staff in their county, that 83% have been traced back to sports, either like a player or a coach on a team. Minnesota health officials have said that there's been over 3,400 cases connected to sports, requiring about 7,200 households to isolate. So I think we have to listen to the doctors. We have to listen to the science. We want them back as quickly as possible. But the reality is that, unfortunately, I think cases are going to continue to get worse in this country, as we're starting to see. And unfortunately, the youth sports system is so fragmented around the country. There's no real one sport ministry like there is in other countries, that it's prevented standard decisions from state to state to state or sport to sport. So if you're in California, yeah, I can understand that you're probably pretty frustrated seeing Arizona, let's say, right near you playing sports. But we've never set that national standard for really anything in our country, unfortunately, as a society, about when it's safe to reopen, when you need to shut it down. And youth sports is just sort of a mirror of society right now.
Karissa, do you want to tackle that question as well? Did we lose Karissa? Apparently we've lost Karissa.
Lose Karissa?
We'll try to get her back. Let's see. So do we have any other questions here that John can answer while we're waiting for her to get Karissa back? John, do you know if any states that are playing football are allowing fans?
Yeah, there are quite a few that are allowing fans. I know Chris probably has a better idea, but I've seen a lot in the South have, Alabama, I believe Florida has, I think Georgia has. One of the most interesting examples, this came in August with fans in the stands, was in Utah. And it was one of the first high school football games, maybe the first that came back. And the fans were all crowded together. They weren't wearing masks like they were supposed to and weren't sitting in the seats they were assigned. And I thought this was terrific. The athletic director literally just stopped the game and I think got on the microphone and they made an announcement, said, the game won't resume until you fans in the stands go back into your assigned seats and, wear the masks, as intended. And I think players on the sideline were encouraging people to do that as well. And so that happened and they were able to resume.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there are quite a few states that are allowing fans for football games.
I see a question here about, will any sports require masks for practice or play? I can tell you from the youth sports perspective, Massachusetts is a state that is requiring masks in soccer and spreading it out. The New York Times recently did a really interesting story on showing how this is working, and it's like totally different than what you would expect, soccer to be. They're spread out. They're wearing masks. I believe there's no throw-ins. They're really trying to limit the contact. I know in Montgomery County, Maryland, which is near where I live, at one point they were requiring masks to play youth soccer. And it was interesting. There was criticism and there was praise for it, just like most of the things in our society these days. There were travel soccer teams that just then would not come into the county to play because of they didn't want to wear the masks while playing, and understandably so for some reasons, because it can create some real breathing concerns, if you're trying to use physical exertion while running around. But on the other hand, Montgomery County did find that their recreation soccer signups was actually doing pretty well, not what it used to be, but doing better than they thought, because there were a lot of parents who felt, oh, this is maybe a safer option for my child to return to sports.
Absolutely, yeah. Got another question here, directed for you, John, regarding the outbreaks related to sport that you had mentioned. What is the evidence of transmission because of a sport at the high school level? Thinking partly because of the Wisconsin report last week indicated.
Right. Yeah. So couple points on that. One is it's a very important question to understand if there's transmission occurring because of the sport. I don't think that there's been complete evidence and conclusions of that yet. But on the other hand, even just being part of a sports setting in a team, there are still risks even beyond whether the transmission occurs on the field. There's still locker rooms, there's still sidelines, there's still team meetings, there's still team dinners. So the Wisconsin study, which I know came out last week, and the conclusion was essentially that high school sports is not increasing at a higher rate, the transmission, than other youth of that age. At Project Play, we talked to 6 medical experts, and I wrote a story about this that was published the other day. It's at projectplay.us. And there's a lot of skepticism about the conclusions that came from the University of Wisconsin study. It was a self-reported study. There were questions about some of the methodology around it. And basically, the opinion was that it really couldn't draw the conclusions that were drawn. It's a very important question to ask, but we want to make sure that we're putting good science out there and that when we're making these decisions.
if you were able to handle any of these other questions, John, but what has been done with respect to ventilation in high school facilities? I'm not sure if that's something you're aware of.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard some examples of doors being open, so say like it's an indoor place, but circulation is a very important aspect because we know that transmission is can spread more likely indoors than outdoors. So, there's been examples of keeping doors open, changing what your ventilation system looks like. But of course, that requires a lot of resources and that requires capacity. I've also heard examples of taking indoor sports and trying to even play them outdoors, right? So maybe you're practicing basketball outdoors. Maybe you're playing volleyball outdoors. Of course, as the weather turns colder, that becomes a lot more difficult in certain parts of the country. But there are a lot of examples of creative ways to try to minimize the risk.
Do you know of any sports that are requiring masks to play during participation?
Mass for participation. I wouldn't say like it's sports. It's just more like a state by state. It's like a state by state breakdown or community breakdown. Like I mentioned, Massachusetts with soccer is doing that. Maryland with soccer is doing that.
Very good. Well, we're trying to get Karissa back on the call here. We'll see a lot of other questions here that are NFHS related, so we'd like to get her on here to answer those live if possible. If she can't make it back on, we'll make sure to get these questions to her and get quotes to you afterwards. But let's see what else we got here. See, are you aware that youth teams from California are traveling to Yuma, Arizona, just across the board competition?
Yeah.
And, the opportunistic hotels and restaurants are price gouging.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've read a story either out of California or Arizona saying like the Motel 6s are costing like $250 a night in Yuma, Arizona right now because just the prices are being jacked up because crowds are coming. Yeah, a lot of travel soccer teams in particular right now are going to Arizona, crossing the border because California can't play. I've seen some reports of just, really high numbers at tournaments in Arizona from California teams. It's just sort of one of the byproducts of, as I mentioned, unfortunately, we never in this country really created or all bought in to what are the real standards, nationally that we need state by state, community by community to reopen or to close down again. And we're seeing it play out in youth sports too.
How do you think the cost of playing sports will change as we move through post-pandemic stages?
The cost to play like for a family, I assume, probably, you think? Or
correct, youth sports, I'm guessing, yeah.
Yeah, it's we're a big believer here at Project Play, and one thing that we're trying to promote is the idea of creating more community-based local leagues moving forward. Your parks and rec departments, your just local leagues that's not going to require as much time, as much money, as much resources that some of the elite travel programs provide. Not that those are necessarily don't have value, but what's happened in the past 10 to 20 years is that youth sports has really become more privatized, meaning that a lot of families have gone to the travel and elite space, even perhaps if their child shouldn't even be there competitively, or maybe doesn't even enjoy it. And it's left so many kids behind. So it's created this huge gap for those local leagues, the parks and rec leagues, where you don't have those parents anymore still being able to volunteer their time and coach. You don't have those families that have more money and are able to provide resources towards the league and pay the fees. So there really is in youth sports often like this missing middle. There is often the elite sports track that you take that's going to cost a lot of money and have a lot of time, and it often is going to result in early sports specialization, which we know can lead to overuse injuries and can lead to burnout. And then there's the lower leagues, so to speak, that have incredible value, but may not be competitive enough for some people, or maybe it's not good enough coaching for some people. So we really need this like middle tier in youth sports, that it's more affordable, but it's maybe more competitive than that, recreational league, but not as competitive and as serious as the travel elite. So we have more options, because I have heard from a lot of parents who during the pandemic have said, wow, it's actually nice to be able to have some time off right now and be able to see our families and have dinner together. But they don't have any other options when youth sports return, and they don't know where to turn to. So they think they'll go right back into the travel scene, even though it's not necessarily what they want.
Thank you. I do kind of want to go back a little bit, slide that you shared on participation numbers during your presentation about the trends in youth sports, and explain maybe the source of those numbers might differ than the NFHS participation survey numbers.
Yeah. So the numbers, we put out our National State of Play report in 2020, and I'll share the link here in a minute in the chat here. And that data, the 2019 data, comes from the Sports and Fitness Industry Association, who we're a partner with. They do a national survey each year online, about like 18 to 20,000 participants. And that tracks a lot of different trends when it comes to sports participation, coach training. That's something we use every year. So that data that is in our National State of Play report is a year old. It's from 2019, pre-pandemic. We also have been working with Utah State University, Travis Dorsch and the Families and Sport Lab, to survey national youth sports parents here during the pandemic. We did a survey in May, did a survey in June, did a survey in September. And these are specifically of parents whose kids were playing sports before COVID. That's a stipulation of the survey. They're between the ages of 6 and 18, so it varies. It's not just high school sports age, but we have ways we can analyze it a little bit more. And that's just to be able to try to get an idea of what their different attitudes are. So it's a different data set, yes, than what the NFHS puts out every year with your participation numbers. And also worth saying that the SFIA data, when we look at it for ages 13 to 17, it's for kids playing all forms of sports at that age, not necessarily only high school, which NFHS puts out.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought that was an important distinction to put in there. What is your best advice to administrators and athletes in states like Massachusetts that have neighboring states that are more relaxed to them, where there's been reports of kids going to play AAU travel in a neighboring state and then coming back and trying to play high school sports? Yeah,
it's a tough one. I mean, personally, I wouldn't advise, going out of state and playing in these sports. I know different parents and different people have different perspectives and different, risk tolerances. I think it all often depends on what the community spread looks like, in your particular state or community. But there's no question that's been a huge trend where you can't play in a particular state, but you're crossing over. I've read reports of that happening, quite a bit in Illinois. That's a state as well that's, I think, been more conservative when it comes to, reopening. And so people have gone to, Iowa or Indiana, or nearby states to be able to play.
Great, thank you. Well, I don't know if we're able to get Karissa back or not. Apparently her internet is just completely out. With regard to the remaining questions that really require her to answer, make sure we'll get those answered. Bruce, what do you want to?
Yeah. So I apologize certainly for this. Karissa's tried to get back on her connection. We greatly appreciate John answering these questions. There's any other questions that you can think of while we have a few minutes here that you would want to address to John, feel free to do that. But we would like, obviously, Karissa to be able to respond to these questions that that you have entered here, and we will do our best to do those and get those out to you, and see if we can reschedule this session soon for another time. But I think at this point, we'll try to, Cody has put our contact information here on the, up on the screen. So feel free to reach out to any of us, and we will reach back out to you with those questions that you have in there and respond. And also, we have John's email and phone number, if you can reach out to him if you have any questions for him. And again, we appreciate his work with the NFHS and the Reimagining School Sports program, and we continue to look forward to working with him in that venture. Again, we apologize for the technological snafu, but we will respond as quickly as we can to your questions, and appreciate your time today, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John.